This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
All right. There we are, the man, the myth, the legend that is Scott Pianowski. How you feeling, baby?
Doing great, man. Doing great. You know, it's week 10. We don't know if Josh Allen's playing. We don't know if Matthew Stafford's playing. Tom Brady's in Germany. Good teams on bye weeks. It's a fantasy. You survive fantasy seasons, right? I always say the skill in fantasy is making the playoffs, and then you hope to get some good bounces or good breaks in the playoffs. But it's survive and advance, man. We're starting guys who weren't on radars. You know, I'm Donovan Peoples-Jones is like in my rosters. This is what fantasy is. It's a game of attrition.
Yeah. I always say half of it is skill and half of it is luck. You got to know what the hell you're doing, obviously, but then you also need the breaks, dude.
For sure.
The injuries just.
I mean, who wouldn't have taken Jonathan Taylor at first or second? I know some people preferred McCaffrey, and they're feeling really good right now. But you would have taken, if you were in a league and McCaffrey went first and Jonathan Taylor was there, you would have taken him. And what's happened there, right? They have no more cards to play. They've changed quarterbacks. They've fired offensive coordinator. They fired their head coach. They have nothing. Taylor may play this week, but good luck behind an offensive line that's been decimated. The two worst running teams in football are the Colts and the Buccaneers. And I know a lot of draft capital was spent on Jonathan Taylor, who got hurt. And I know a lot of draft capital has been spent on Lenny Fournette. My joke about Fournette is that he looks like he's 45. The whole team does.
Yeah.
I can't. Big O, can you understand why Seattle's an underdog in that game? They've been better than Tampa Bay for 2 months. Now, look, you go to Germany. I don't know how that knocks the players out of the routine. Sometimes you'll hear that one team flew there earlier, one team flew there later, one team gets food poisoning. I don't know what's going to happen with that type of stuff. You can't know it. But the Seahawks, Geno Smith, in a year where we can't trust any quarterbacks, Geno Smith is my spirit animal, man. And I am so glad. We talked 5 or 6 weeks ago. I had a team that was in trouble. I had to trade Justin Herbert and Mike Evans for a couple of guys named Tua and Tyreek Hill. It saved my season. Even with Tua not doing anything for a few weeks with the unfortunate situation with the concussions, and that's a scary thing. You obviously got to be careful about that. I am so glad that every week I get to watch Tyreek Hill just motor past people, and Tua's having a great season. And look, I did that out of desperation. It wasn't like I went after that proactively. I'd like to think talking to you probably encouraged me to make that trade. It took a team that was in trouble to now I'm one of the favorites in that league.
Yeah, dude, and he's dealing right now. So you've got one of the hotter quarterbacks now, along with Tyreek. That's a hell of a combination that you got yourself in there. All right, remember, you want to get in, 855-912-1056. That's our Welt and Rayom text line. That's 855-912-1056. And, of course, you can send them in right here on the YouTube chat board. We will check those out there. We will also check out some of the sleepers. You talked about Tampa Bay. Ricard White, would that be a guy that you're going to use this week?
You may have to. Had a season-high touches. He really hasn't done a lot with his efficiency, but neither has Fournette. With running backs, with Tom Brady, we're always looking at who's in the circle of trust, and maybe White is. Also, late in that game, I'd like to see Cameron Brate get scratched to feel better about Cade Otton, but Cade Otton's a guy I may trust this week. Scotty Miller, if I were really desperate, he had a touchdown, hit him in the chest. He dropped it on the second to last drive, but he was active in that game. And let me give you another player I'm really high on. Now, we all know Justin Fields is running like crazy. If you have Fields, you don't need any help playing him. But because they've gotten more proactive in the passing game, now we can play Darnell Mooney fairly confidently. And I think Cole Kmet, who scored touchdowns the last 2 weeks, he just had a season high in targets. Look, he's not going to be Travis Kelce. He's not going to be George Kittle. I'm not saying any of that. But you may have drafted Darren Waller and you're struggling. Or you may have Mark Andrews, who's hurt right now and he's on a bye week. I think decent chance Cole Kmet scores a touchdown for the third straight week. So Otton and Kmet at a position that's awful for fantasy are guys I'm relying on in week 10.
All right, let me go here. 90 Miles is asking flex Mostert, Devontae Smith, Judy, Ayuk, or Melvin Gordon for the flex here.
Man, a lot of choices. Ayuk and Mostert are the two guys I settle on. It looks like San Francisco. Miami's going to use both their backs. They were lucky that they got Jeff Wilson, who already knew the system, so he played a lot. That was an interesting sideline last week where guys like Wilson and Hawkinson changed teams. A lot of times I'm really careful with players changing teams, but they were good right out of the box. I think I'd lean Mostert. If you wanted to play Ayuk, I'd be fine with it. That's really good depth. And don't be afraid. Look around your league, right? You may be able to package a couple of these guys to one of your desperate league mates for a better player. It's the oldest fantasy trick in the book. I think everybody knows that. But there's someone in your league right now who's totally screwed. Maybe you could trade a couple of those guys and get a no-doubt starter for every week. So see if something's available to you. I lean Mostert, fine with Ayuk.
Chris Goodwin or Tyler Lockett?
It's got to be Lockett. Godwin is going towards. There's only been 5 receivers in the target era, which goes back to 1992, who have 100+ targets and no touchdowns. And right now, Deontay Johnson and Chris Godwin are challenging for that spot. They're both in like 60, 70 target range. Just a lot broken in Tampa Bay right now. I don't want to mess with it. I believe in Geno Smith. I believe in Tyler Lockett. I would be playing Metcalf and Lockett anywhere I can. And Kenneth Walker's going to go down as a league winner. If you drafted him late or if you got lucky enough to pick him up on waivers, man, he's going to be a guy who might run you to a championship. I'm all in on the Seahawks offense.
All right. St. Michael says, I was laughed at for taking Josh Allen, Tyreek and Waddle with my first 3 picks. Who's laughing now? Although hopefully Josh Allen doesn't have a UCL injury, my brother, because he might be done for the year.
I think they're crazy if they play Allen this week.
I agree. I don't. In fact, I think you might be. You should keep him on the shelf for several weeks, because if it is a partial tear of the UCL, all the pitchers, they end up with Tommy John.
Yep.
They go back out. Oh yeah, and they end up completely tearing it. And if you completely tear it, listen, I don't care. I'm a Dolphins fan. But you'll ruin it this year and next year, because it's no less than a 12-month injury. So
This is why I don't mean to pick on Buffalo. I mean, great team, great organization, everything. But you saw games earlier in the year where they were blowing teams out and they were running designed runs for Josh Allen. It's like, what are you doing? He's the one guy you have no replacement for. Nobody has a replacement for a star quarterback. You're lucky if you have a Case Keenum who's a quality backup. I always say the good backup quarterbacks are like that donut tire in the back of your car. You can go 50 miles or 100 miles with it. You don't want to drive cross country with it. If I'm Buffalo, man, I play Case Keenum this week. Now, the spillover would be, you got to play Diggs. I think you have to probably play Singletary, who's, whatever. He'll have more touchdown equity if Allen doesn't play. And then everybody else is a case-by-case basis. I don't think Gabe Davis is an automatic starter anymore. The tight ends I mentioned earlier, I would play over Dawson Knox. Buffalo, this is stating the obvious. Just another team if Josh Allen's not in a football field.
I'm with you there. All right, let's go to the Welt and Rayom text line, 855-912-1056. Ayuk, Sutton starting. Which one?
I need a show of faith from Courtland Sutton. His production, my friend Pat Fitzmaurice was talking about this, has gone down since they got Greg Dulcich going at tight end, and Jerry Jeudy has been out producing Sutton as well. Until Sutton shows me something, and I realize Ayuk has a lot of players to compete for the ball in San Francisco. What a talented offense they have, but Ayuk's been performing lately and Sutton hasn't been. I don't care about the name. I don't care about when I drafted these guys. I care about how they're playing right now and how they're being used right now, and we can't trust Courtland Sutton at the moment. I think if you have any reasonable alternative, I would bench Sutton in week 10.
Remember, you can follow Scott on Twitter at Scott_Pianowski, and make sure you check him out there at Yahoo Sports all week long and weekends, getting you ready for a little fantasy action. Razzle Dazzle Crypto, Flex Spot, Jeff Wilson, or Mecole Hardman.
I wouldn't be against Wilson, and I'm glad you have him, but Hardman scored 3 straight weeks. It's funny that they went out and traded for Tony, and maybe it's time that they finally figured out what they want Hardman to be. He gets that jet sweep action. A year where they lose Tyreek Hill, it isn't the greatest receiver room in the league. Juju's a good player, but he's not an electric player. I like the way they've unlocked Hardman the last 3 weeks, and they can't run the ball. They gave up on running the ball last week. They had like 102 snaps, and none of their running backs did anything. So Hardman, whose players frustrated me for several fantasy seasons, I'll admit it, he's in my circle of trust right now.
All right. Let's see. What else? Oh, should I start Devin Singletary?
It comes down to options. The thing with him to remember, even though the offense won't be as good, is his touchdown equity goes up when Josh Allen's off the field, because Allen's, we always expect when Buffalo scores a rushing touchdown, you think it's Josh Allen, right? He's such a dynamic runner. So I think Singletary goes from maybe 15% chance to score a touchdown to maybe 35 or 40%. And I know they traded for Hines. I know they have other backs there, but he'll get 15 touches. Usually when the games are competitive, that's when they rely on Singletary. I think he's a good play. I can't answer this question without knowing your whole roster, but I think he's a reasonable, proactive play in Week 10.
All right, let's go for some deep picks, flex guys with injuries and all kinds of stuff going on. You've been talking about one guy with the Chargers. How about DeAndre Carter? Does he move up to be at least a flex this week?
Yeah, Palmer's probably a 2, and Carter, who just had his best receiving game of the year, is probably a flex. Unfortunately, I'm not sure how healthy Justin Herbert is, and he's getting the San Francisco defense at a time when they're getting healthier. But they're guys I could play. We talked about Hardman, this is a week I could play him. I think you go back to Brandon Cooks. I know the situation's ugly. He doesn't want to be there. He wanted to be traded, but he's going to play this week. He's somebody I like. Alan Lazard is probably already locked into lineups. He's the only thing going in that Green Bay passing game. Darius Slayton, a player I always liked. He had a good rookie year. He's been off the map for a while. There's talk that maybe Galladay will play this week. I don't care. I think Slayton is the best receiver on the Giants. Again, with bye weeks, you may play him. Mac Hollins. I know the Raiders offense is just radioactive right now, but Waller's on IR. Renfro's on IR. Hollins may lead this team in receiving. I know Devontae Adams is mad. He had a big first half. He did nothing in the second half. He's pointing fingers at Josh McDaniels. It sure looks like McDaniels could be a one and done. I could see him being the Alabama offensive coordinator next year.
They're too cheap to fire him, bro, and swallow all that money.
Well, maybe they come to an agreement, right? Where it's like, you're not happy, I'm not happy. Let's meet in the middle somewhere. Either way, I think Mac Hollins is somebody. These are desperation plays. You're not benching Terry McLaurin for these guys. You're not benching Devonta Smith for these guys. But no. I liked both the Charger guys you mentioned and just some of the other guys I brought up. I'm not playing anybody in the Colts game. Michael Pittman I have to bench. It breaks my heart to do it because I love Michael Pittman as a player. And I mentioned Peoples-Jones. Remember also with Peoples-Jones, and it's not fun to talk about this because Deshaun Watson's not a fun topic, but he's coming back in a few weeks. And they have a very narrow usage tree. It's Cooper. It's Peoples-Jones. They'll throw to Njoku when he gets back. Donovan Peoples-Jones is in my top 40 this week. That's where we are in Week 10.
All right. Wan'Dale Robinson. Has he made it to your flex?
Yeah, he and Slayton are really close. Again, there's not a lot of options there. They're going to try. They're playing this Houston defense that can't stop the run, so Barkley's probably going to get like 25 or 30 touches, and maybe Jones only throws for like 175, 180 yards, but it won't be distributed to that many players. So I could play Slayton or Robinson in a bye week with injury pinch, sure.
All right, Dolphins and Browns. Outside of the obvious, Tua, Tyreek, and Waddle. What else do you like in that game?
I think both Miami backs are playable. I don't trust Gesicki right now. I just don't think he has a week-to-week role with the team. And on the Browns, it's pretty narrow. I mean, Chubb is terrific. Cooper is really, really good. I said Peoples-Jones, I think, is playable. And Hunt will probably get 8 to 10 touches, maybe 12 touches. If that does anything for you, maybe you have to play Jacoby Brissett if you're really screwed with injuries. But these are two teams. I always talk about the teams with the narrow usage. Miami, man, when they're throwing it, it's usually the two guys. And when Cleveland throws it, maybe Njoku comes back. But if he doesn't come back, it's going to be the two guys either. I've never understood why they don't throw the ball to Nick Chubb. But I do think there'll be a fair amount of points in this game. But it's going to be to the main guys. It's going to be the steak is going to come through in this game. It's not going to be about the appetizer. It's not going to be about the dessert. It's going to be about the steak. It's going to be about Hill, about Waddle. They'll be celebrating in the end zone. And I think Chubb and Cooper will have good games as well.
All right. Antonio Gibson or Devin Singletary?
Gonna go Singletary. At least Gibson with McKissick out of the way is quasi-playable. He didn't do much last week, and Heineke was kind of exposed, and you would think a good Eagles defense might make Heineke look really bad on Monday night. I lean Singletary, but I still think Gibson belongs on rosters because when we could get a backfield reduced from 3 to 2, the McKissick injury makes that a two-man backfield. That's plausible in fantasy now. We can get points out of it. It used to be, you and I go back Big O, where the running back by committee was you had to avoid any team that used 2 running backs. Now that number is New England
was that pain in the ass for many years.
Sure.
Like I hated New England. I would never draft a running back in New England because it would just piss you off.
Or all the Shanahanigans, whether you talk about Mike or Kyle. But now it's like when we talk about a backfield with 2 backs, again, the great thing with the Miami backfield is that there's only 2 guys. They're not messing around with a fullback. Tua doesn't run the ball that much. So you're not going to get 25 touches from one of those guys, but you're going to get 13 or 15. They both have some equity around the goal line. So when I can get a backfield down to 2, I feel pretty good about it, which is why Gibson is viable in this question, but I lean Singletary for week 10.
Well, I just brought up one of the flex sleepers, Brandon Cooks or Wan'Dale Robinson, PPR. Jay Hurd is asking.
Yeah, I'm going to go Cooks. I know it's frustrating. I know Mills is slid backwards this year. He wasn't that bad as a rookie, but this year he hasn't played well. Cooks isn't happy, but I think there'll be a little bit of a squeaky wheel, and Cooks will probably have 8 or 10 targets in this game. I'll lean that way.
All right. With Mahomes as my QB and Bills as my defense, possibly drop Trevor Lawrence for New England's defense?
It comes down to what the waiver wire looks like a quarterback. If you're going to have a viable pickup, if Mahomes gets hurt, of course, if Mahomes gets hurt, you're probably screwed anyway. Jacksonville's such a weird team. They're like 5th in first downs. They're 10th or 11th in offensive DVOA, but they seem to shoot themselves in the foot a lot. They haven't been the most efficient team in the red zone. I was encouraged by the way Lawrence played last week. I don't think the Patriots defense, I know you're thinking Zach Wilson next week, right? They're going to make his life miserable. They just had a 9-sack game against that Colts junior varsity team. So I get it. It comes down to if you feel confident you can pick up a quarterback if you need one later in the year, then fine. I'll play the look-ahead game. If your waiver wire is all guys you don't want to go anywhere near, then maybe you need to keep Lawrence. That's the way to figure out that question.
Jeff Saturday's not happy with that comment.
Sorry,
Aaron
Jeff.
Jones, if he's out, do I start Dylan or Latavius Murray?
You'd have to start Dylan because you could see 15 or 20 touches. Denver probably is going to split their usage to multiple guys. And man, that Denver-Tennessee game, I think the total is 36.5, and I still think you have to go under. It looks like you told me either team would get the 17 points. I'm like, good, you're going to win. Both teams want to run the ball. Both teams want to get the game over with. I mean, look at what Tennessee's done the last 2 weeks with Willis, and I realize they're going to get Tannehill back. It doesn't matter. He's going to throw 22 passes. So I think it's going to be a very short game. Murray, 9, 11 touches, something like that. I realize Dylan has not played this very well this year, but if Jones is out, you got to figure Dylan gets 15 touches and maybe some goal line opportunities. I also think, the Packers have lost 5 games in a row. I don't trust the Packers, but I think they'll at least show up. I don't think they're a punching bag. I think they're just a team with a lot of problems, which puts them in a big bucket right now. Dylan over Murray.
Yeah, with the freaking quarterback just pointing fingers at everybody.
Man, does he look miserable? He looks like he'd rather be doing anything but playing quarterback, man. And
you know what it is? He just looks like the guy that was like, for years I've been banging heads with you guys. You don't get me enough talent, this, that. And, I'm out the door, bro. F you guys. I don't care anymore. I'm going to say whatever's on my mind. This season's a disaster. And why? Because you guys are a disaster. And I think that's what this is, the dude that's kind of like just unloading on the organization after all these years of not getting what he needed on offense at times.
Yeah.
And so he's
to be
just
fair, I
taking it
think
out on them.
that's spot on. I think there's culpability on both sides. I think Rodgers could be a better teammate. This famous story, guys in his passing tree didn't have his cell phone number, But when they draft Jordan Love in the first round, who nobody had a first-round grade on, it's like, what are you doing? And all the years they've not drafted receivers. Of course, this year they tried to do it, and they looked like they whiffed on their guys, at least for the first year. They've done a little spinning about, we tried to trade for Chase Claypool, we tried to trade for Brandon Cooks, we couldn't get these guys, but it's like Alan Lazard is might as well be Sterling Sharp on that team. I mean, that's how bad their options are. And Lazard, man, I'm glad I have him in some leagues. He's the only guy Rodgers trusts right now.
So the Colts organization is pissed off with Scott Pianowski for calling him a JV team. Jeff Saturday now is pissed off because you called his team a JV team. And now you said Jordan Love didn't have a first-round grade by everybody. And Brian Flores, who wanted Jordan Love over Tua, is now pissed off at you. Boy, you are on a real roll today, just pissing people off, man.
Yeah, it's a game of opinions, man. We say what we think, and
God bless you.
I mean, look, I'm realistic, man. I know we talk 4 months a year about this fantasy stuff, and I realize a lot of what I say is going to be wrong. I was telling people,
but you're right on all of those, by the way.
Well, okay, I thought Patterson was a good play last night.
I'm just having fun with it. That you.
Somebody wrote me last week. Somebody wrote me last week, and he said, "Should I trade Jonathan Taylor for Donta Foreman and like maybe Ayuk or some lesser receiver?" And I said, it was a private conversation. He didn't want anybody in his league to see that he was thinking of trading Taylor that inexpensively. And I said, I don't have faith that Taylor's going to be healthy the rest of the season, or he'll play. He may play this week. He's practicing, but he's got the high ankle sprain. He's got such little help around him. It sure looks like Donta Foreman's a more valuable player right now than Jonathan Taylor. This is where fantasy takes you. Yeah. Justin Fields right now, circle of trust. Brady, Wilson, Rodgers, Stafford. I don't trust any of those guys. Stafford may not even play this week because of a concussion. And even if he does, his elbow's still messed up. His offensive line stinks. He's got one receiver he trusts. Matt, you could drop Matt Stafford in the league, and I probably wouldn't even pick him up. I mean, well, how many things would have to go right before you fix it? I even think Sean McVay might have a foot out the door. I think he regrets coming back. So, we're in a world where Justin Fields and Geno Smith are saving our lives. Donta Foreman is saving our fantasy lives. But that's what happens. Maybe Jeff Wilson is a fantasy savior. If Mostert ever got hurt, or if they decided Wilson was the lead back there, I think they're both going to play. And I love the shape of this offense right now. But I don't care. The bottom line with this, my ethos in fantasy, is I don't care about the name. I don't care about what you paid for him at the auction. I don't care what round you took somebody in. At this point, if somebody's producing for me, I'll play him. And if somebody's not producing for me, I won't. And it doesn't matter when they were drafted or what I thought 2 or 3 months ago. You have to be fluid with this stuff.
Yeah, and Foreman, by the way, is just solidifying this year what he did last year. So he should, if he's going to keep bouncing around the league, I hope the Dolphins pick him up for next year. He runs hard, dude. He had a nice, tough run yesterday for that touchdown overall. I mean, just watching Mariota, that was tough to watch. John Padilla is asking the Knox kid from Bills or Mike G from Miami.
Yeah,
needs one.
Knox by default, but I mentioned some of those other tight ends like Otten and Komet. If you can get your hands on those guys, I would play them over either of the choices you mentioned.
Although Komet cannot be, unless you're in a league that everybody's smoking crack pipes.
Well, Komet hadn't done much until last week. I mean, he was getting 2 or 3 targets a game, and they were a team that was hiding their quarterback. The thing about Chicago is they're no longer hiding Fields. They're letting him let his hair down, and they're doing proactive stuff. And
it looks like Komet is becoming a part of that offense
yes,
for him. And those are high percentage passes. So I always young QBs. You want tight ends and running backs in those offenses in fantasy because young QBs, they will work from inside out with them because those are the easier throws.
Two more tight ends. Totally agree with that. 2 more tight ends I want you to either pick up or trade for. You probably can't pick these guys up, but Dulcich has been good all 3 weeks in Denver. They had their bye week last week. And with Claypool gone in Pittsburgh, a lot of his the routes that he has vacated are going to be picked up by Pat Freiermuth. The Steelers have even admitted this. And again, young quarterback. What's the easiest throw for him? A big guy between the numbers. Pat Freiermuth's going to be a really good player the rest of the way.
Follow him on Twitter at Scott_Pianowski. Catch his work there at Yahoo Sports and tell him what you're doing there at Yahoo Sports, my friend.
Yep, sleepers went up on Thursday. The picks, and we're like 64% against the spread. The picks are going up in maybe an hour from now. Sunday, Fantasy Football Live, the final hour before kickoff. Of course, you're going to wake up early. You're on your own with the Buccaneers and Seahawks. I do like Seattle in that game. I like Kate out in that game as well. Fantasy Football Live at noon Eastern time with Barons and the crew on video. I'll be handling the Yahoo Fantasy account. So if we didn't get your question today, you're welcome to tweet to Yahoo Fantasy. Mention you're from the show. I'll make sure you get expedited service if I see it.
There you go.
And let's get you a win in Week 10, man. Just get in the playoffs. I don't care what you think of your team. Get into the playoffs. You can be NC State 1983. You can be Jimmy Valvano looking for somebody to hug. You just got to get in the tournament, man.
I'm with you there. By the way, John's asking, Kevin G said, Jeff Saturday is going to be Dan Campbell Jr. Here's what I ask you. Who wins more games from here to the end of the year, Dan Campbell or the man in Indianapolis, Jeff Saturday?
I'm going with Dan Campbell.
Okay.
And by the way, we agree on Campbell. I would love him in my coaching room. I just don't think he's made to be a head coach.
No, he's not a head coach. Yeah, the rah-rah shit just doesn't work as a head coach. It's not good. You gotta literally show them that you put them in positions to win week in and week out. That's when you win players over. Too many people think the rah-rah stuff is going to lift players up, and
that's high school stuff. That's Pop Warner stuff.
Yeah, that's the shit bores them, bro. They don't pay attention to that. Scott, as always, you're a stud, my brother. Have a great weekend. May the big wins be yours, my friend. We'll catch up next week.
Yep, great talking to you. See you next week.
Thank you, sir. That is the great Scott Pianowski, baby, with a little fantasy football, sports grip, fantasy football zone.